Hello everyone, this is my second video that I am doing for my friend Nick Peters, who runs Deeper Waters podcast. In the previous video, what we did was we took the raw recording of a Skype call with Rosaria Butterfield over here, and we separated the tracks into two separate tracks because the way a Molto Skype recorder recorded the Skype call was it recorded Nick's voice on the left channel and the caller's voice on both channels, and we needed to separate them into two separate tracks so that we could process them, like increase the volume of one and decrease the volume of another. We could do that separately. So once we've done that, let's import these two files, which we also denoised in Audacity, which has a free denoiser included. Let's import these two files into Reaper. Now, it's asking us, insert multiple media items on separate tracks or sequentially on a single track. We do not want to insert it on a single track, one followed after another. We don't want that. We want them to be parallel, talking simultaneously, so separate tracks. Boom, it imported them on two separate tracks, and they are perfectly in sync.
I'm Nick Peters. Welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
Now, I recommend that you right-click on this ruler over here and go and check minutes and seconds, because right now it shows beats and minutes and seconds, but we don't need beats. If we were making music, we would need beats because our music follows tempo, and when we edit something, when we cut something, we want to stay in sync with the tempo when editing music. But since we're editing just voice, we don't need any beats. We don't need to be in tempo. So seconds. Now it shows 5 seconds, 10 seconds, which is better. Now these grid lines, when we click anywhere, the cursor lands on the grid line, which is great for music, again, because we would want to be editing like in sync with the tempo, but we don't want that for voice. What if we want to cut somewhere here and it jumps either here or here? Now, this button right here, hides or shows the grid lines, and this one makes it possible to drop our cursor anywhere we want and and edit anywhere we want. So now let's see what we can do with these audio files. Let's just make them a little more visible like that. Now scroll wheel on the mouse either zooms in or out. Quite nice. And if you hold Alt while scrolling on the scroll wheel, you can move from the start to the end of the tracks by holding Alt and scrolling the scroll wheel. The most time that you're gonna be spending while editing is cutting out those filler words like and maybe different noises. Somebody hits the mic and you want to cut that out. That's gonna take the majority of your time. So let's listen and see what we can find.
Only through the grace of Christ is...
Let's say you want to cut out this So what you want to do is select here on the ruler, because if you try selecting here, you won't be able to. By left clicking, it allows you to drag the track but not select it. Control Z, undo. So if you mess something up, Control Z undoes what you've just done. You select here on the ruler what you want to select. And if you want to cut this out, Control Delete. Not just delete, Control Delete. It deleted the from this track. And it's good if you want to delete something just from one track. But what if you want to delete it from both? So Control Z to undo. Over here, you click it twice, this ripple editing. Now you're gonna be editing all tracks. So if you Control Delete, boom, you've just deleted from both tracks, and in addition to that, it has slid everything that was to the right, just moved over to the cut point. Let's undo. Let's deselect this one. Control Edit, Control Delete. You delete only one. Now, if you don't have this selected and you still want to delete from both, but you don't want everything that's to the right to move over to the left to the cut point, what you need to do is select both tracks by holding Shift. You select one, hold Shift, you select another, and it will cut from both tracks whatever you've selected here on the ruler, this whitish area, and you're going to be left with a hole over here. Control Delete, boom. You delete it from both tracks. What you can do is select both, grab with the left click, and slide it over a little bit past each other, and now it's creating automatic fades here. Now these are quite helpful because they prevent any kind of clicks or pops resulting from an unclean edit. Because if you cut a waveform somewhere over here, it's gonna result in a click. Like, in order to avoid any clicks, you would have to cut where the waveform intersects the zero line over here. If you cut here, theoretically there won't be any clicks, but you can't zoom in that much all the time every time you want to cut out an or something. That would be just time consuming. So what you can do is either slide and it'll automatically create this crossfade for you, or undo, 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 undo. Or you can select this one twice, Control Delete, and it's just deleted it from both tracks, and it has moved everything that's to the right over here to the cut point for you. So you don't have to manually grab it and, you know, and slide it over. It did it for you. And that's what you do. You move over.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it.
Let's say you want to edit somewhere over here.
Answer.
Too much the
grid.
Let's say you want to select like that. Control Edit. And let's listen to it again.
Picture answer. The grid of it, the details is that when...
Oh, that sounds pretty good. Sounds smooth. Now, the key is to make the edits completely unnoticeable. If you notice that an edit has been made, you've done a bad job. They must be unnoticeable and natural sounding. And what do I mean by natural sounding? Let's find something to cut out.
When I was a professor, I wasn't just...
This let's say we want to cut out this and we select all of that, and we just cut it out, Control Delete. Now, it's gonna sound pretty unnatural. Listen.
When I was a professor, I wasn't just...
See, it jumped unnaturally fast.
When I was a professor, I wasn't just...
People don't talk like that. Undo. So what you want to do is leave some space, leave some room, because that's how people naturally talk. They talk with pauses. Control Delete. And now let's listen to that.
When I was a professor, I wasn't just...
Yeah, much more natural when we leave a bit of room, and that's the key. You want to make it sound natural, and no edits should be noticed at all. That would mean that you've done a good job editing.
I wasn't just,
Let's delete this. Control delete.
I wasn't just,
We would have to delete even more than that. Control Z to undo.
I wasn't just someone who ignored the.
So you can actually just drag this by just left clicking and dragging it.
I wasn't just someone who ignored.
Let's try that. We've just deleted it. Let's listen.
Professor. I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue.
It's kinda jumpy.
Sir. I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian faith. I found the Christian faith to be threatening.
Mm-hmm.
Although it sounds fine, I think.
I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian faith. I found the.
Yeah, and that's what you do. You make decisions. Doesn't sound natural or does it not? Because not every time when you cut out something, it's gonna sound natural. Sometimes you just have to leave it there and just not cut it out if it makes it sound unnatural. And once again, if you want to delete something
Dangerous.
from one track,
And so threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know, let's say you want to delete this Let's say it's not maybe just Nick has hit his microphone or something and you just want to cut this out. You will have to go out of the ripple editing by clicking it. You would have to select Nick's track, which is selected. You select this one, Control Delete, and you've just deleted it from Nick's track. If you want to cut out a bit more, you can just drag it like this. Let's say there is some noise here that you don't want. I don't know, maybe your cat is, breathing into a microphone or something and you want to edit it out. You can just do it like that.
just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian faith. I found the Christian faith to.
And you has left the second track untouched because you went out of the ripple edit. Now what we want to do is compress and EQ both tracks. So let's do that. We insert any effects like compressors and equalizers here and here for each track or for the master track. Now the master track is the track where every sound in your project ends up at. Every sound goes to this master track, and this is a sort of a global volume control that
Now it's an honor to have you here.
now you can't hear anything, neither Nick nor Rosaria nor any intro music or sound effects that we're gonna have here, because this is the master fader. It controls the volume of everything.
Just someone who ignored.
Now if you want to return it to 0, you hold Alt and left click. It returned. Now what we want to do is create a new track, insert new track. So it's over here. Let's slide it over and let's name it here. Let's name it both. And what it means that we are going to send both of these voices to this track. They're gonna be coming through this track because we would want to insert an effect on here that would apply to both, like a limiter. Now, unfortunately, Reaper doesn't have a limiter, A limiter is like a compressor that is going to prevent any sound from going over 0 and clipping. Like over here, you see red. Red means it has clipped. Now, also what we can do is decrease the volume a little bit to prevent it from clipping. We can do that, but we're still gonna have to put the limiter at the end of the sound chain to increase the overall volume of both voices, but to prevent them from going into the red. So let's do it right now, because now Reaper doesn't have a limiter. We're gonna have to download one. So go to, and let's download some more stuff. Here, go to tokyodawn.net. Go to audio plugins, and what you want to download is this Nova Dynamic EQ. We might need it or we might not, but it's a really good plugin to have, and it's free. So download it. Windows installer, accept. Now you don't have to subscribe if you don't want to, but you can. And it has already downloaded over here. I'm in Google Chrome. Go back. This Slick EQ is a good sounding equalizer. Download it. It doesn't hurt. Windows installer, accept. You don't have to subscribe. Has already downloaded. Another page is go to vladgsound.wordpress.com. Go to plugins, and here, limiter number 6. We are going to need this limiter because Reaper doesn't have a limiter. Download page. Here, limiter limiter number 6, Windows VST. Download zip file. Direct download. Now, it may also give you a message like, hey, do you want to subscribe or something? You can just click away and it'll download automatically. Now, let's go to the place wherever it downloaded to. In my case, it's going to be downloads. There. Limiter, Nova, Slick EQ. Unzip. Extract. Now, let's install them. Go to Nova. Now, install both 32 and 64-bit VST. You don't need AXX because AXX is for Pro Tools. We're working in Reaper. Reaper reads VST plugins. You can install both 32 and 64. Install. Same with the Slick EQ. Install both 32 and 64. You don't need AXX. And limiter. Now, limiter doesn't have the installer, so what you want to do is copy this DLL, copy, go to your local disk C, go to Program Files 86, because Reaper reads from I think it reads from both 32 and 64-bit version. That one is, that DLL was 32-bit, so go to Program Files 86, and down here you should have a folder which was probably created by default when we installed the Nova and the Slick EQ. Steinberg. Steinberg is a company that created the VST plugins. They are the pioneers. This is their VST folder, and you just paste. Oh, I already have it here, there, limiter 6. I already had it here and pasted before, so I'm just gonna copy and replace. There, you have limiter DLL. And now, when you go to your Reaper FX, you may you may go to Options. Does it have a rescan here? FX plugin settings. VST. Rescan. When you click rescan, it rescanned everything, and whatever we've just installed while Reaper was open, it rescanned them and added the plugins into its library. So now let's mess with compressors and EQs. Let's find an equalizer. EQ, rear EQ. It comes with Reaper. Now you're not gonna have all these ones. These ones I've bought over the years. So choose rear EQ, which is a really nice EQ. Now equalizer is like a volume control for different frequencies: highs, low frequencies, mid frequencies. So what you want to do is let's start with the low. Select low. It gives you the type. Select high pass, or another name is low cut. So it's gonna cut every low frequency below this point and leave every high frequency. That's why high pass, because every high frequency is passes, untouched. And you want to filter out everything below, let's say about 85 hertz or so. See there, 85, or here, 85. And this is the Q. Now, it doesn't have to be that, because it starts affecting frequencies from like 6, 7, from like 1000 hertz. That's too much. Just make it like that. So yeah, cuts everything below 85. Now, why do we want to do that? Because if a fire truck comes by, an engine rumbles outside, or your refrigerator or your air conditioner, all this low frequency rumble we don't need. We're just cutting it out. The same goes for high frequency. Actually, Amazon, the ACX audiobook creator site for Amazon, when you create audiobooks, you can do it yourself and submit the files. They require that you choose low pass here. Don't make it, just make it steeper. That you cut everything above 16,000 hertz. Right here, you see 16,000, because above 16,000 hertz lives just hiss that you like, you just don't need it. You can just cut it out. And we're gonna mess with some middle frequencies over here. Now, in your particular voice, Nick, you have a resonance that I've found out around 4,000 hertz. So you can just type 4,000. And here, listen to your voice with this accentuated.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take.
Do you hear how brittly, I don't know how to describe it, but it's there and it's resonating too much. So let's.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was.
Look at the analyzer. Look at the yellow line, yellow analyzer, and you'll see this bump that is higher than it should be.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before.
That's a resonance in your voice that I normally cut out just a little, like that. What is it? 4 dB. And the Q, here's the Q. It should equal to whatever the spectrogram was representing.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting.
the width of the cue. Like, you don't want to make it that much. Like that. Now, everybody has a resonance in their voice. Some resonances are higher, some are lower. I think I have around 3000 hertz resonance. You have around 4000, and it peaks a little high. So if you cut a little bit out, it's gonna just smooth out the general frequency response of your voice.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to.
Also, around this range here, 1500, 2000, around this range lives the nasality of a voice.
You know, the nasal frequencies that just makes the voice nasal.
And not every voice sounds nasal, but some voices do. And you want to find where the voice is the most nasal and also cut it. You find it just by sweeping it like that. Let's do it.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before this interview came, but her story is very famous. In fact, when I was telling one of my friends about wanting to get her on, he said, "Good luck with that." And I was like, "Well, my luck has come here."
Somewhere here, which is around 1500 hertz, is where the nasality becomes most obvious. So what we want to do is to cut a little bit, like, what is it, 3 dB or so? And let's listen to that.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous.
Oh, and you can see it on the spectrogram, because like this bump, it's
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before. Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous.
Let's insert another EQ, the same one, re-EQ. Now, how the sound flows is it flows from top to bottom. So it goes through the top EQ first, then it goes through this EQ, and then whatever if we insert a kind of like a compressor over here, it'll go through EQ, compressor. The routing is from top to bottom. What we want to do on this EQ is give it a little bit of warmth over here in the low, very low frequencies.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before this interview came, but her story is.
Now, not every voice is gonna need this low frequencies boosted a little, because there are voices that are already naturally very bassy. Like when I was editing the episode with Richard Bauckham has so much bass in his voice that I had to cut it like that instead of boosting. In your voice, Nick, it's helpful to boost
Things
a
gone
little.
wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before.
And around there, let's like that. Now watch the spectrogram.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place.
Around there is a sort of a boxiness. Maybe it's a resonance in your room or something. Let's boost and listen.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before this interview came, but her story is
Here.
very famous.
Let's clean it up a little like that. It's kind of too boxy. I don't know.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to take place.
Maybe that's too much of a boost.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap.
Yeah, don't boost too much, because you can easily overdo it. Just, oh look, I sound like a radio, and yeah, I used to overdo it too. So learn from my mistakes.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous.
And now let's bypass both EQs and hear the difference. Now this is the original without any EQs.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous.
Kind of thin. Now with EQs.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her on previous. I was half expecting a rap show to.
It sounds warmer. It sounds more like it's closer to the microphone, because the low frequency boost gives a sort of a proximity effect, as if you're closer to the microphone.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her I'm pretty sure. I was half expecting a...
Maybe a little more.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her I'm pretty sure. I was half expecting a rap show to take place. Things gone wrong. I was just telling her I'm pretty sure. I was half expecting a rap show to take place before this interview came. But her story is...
Okay, let's bypass again.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you can hear the nasality.
The nasality of the voice.
That's fine. Everybody has different voice, but you can sort of smooth it out with these tools, and that's pretty cool. And once you train your ear, you're not gonna get it the first time, but once you listen and practice, you're gonna get it, because your ears will learn how all these different frequencies sound like. You'll learn. It just takes practice. So they're bypassed.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her I'm pretty sure. I was half
with the cues.
Things gone wrong. I was just telling her I'm pretty sure. I was half expecting...
Oh, the difference is dramatic. It's just obvious. Now what we need is a compressor. Compressor is gonna be under dynamics, rear comp. Okay. Now what compressor does? Let's zoom. Compressor attenuates the volume of high peaks so they would be more or less equal to these quieter words. Because when you, let's say you drive in your car and you listen to the podcast, you're gonna hear these loud parts all right, but the quiet ones may get lost in the road noise. So you want to make the voice sound more even as far as loudness goes. So we are gonna set this compressor to attenuate the volume of these high peaks while leaving the lower volume alone, and thereby is gonna bring the volume of high peaks down and kind of level out the sound. So what are these parameters? Attack. Attack is how fast a compressor goes from non-compressing to fully compressing. And on a voice, about 10 milliseconds is a good start. Release is how fast a compressor releases. So it goes fully into compression and then it stops compressing once the loud peak becomes quieter. That's how fast the compressor releases. On a voice, around 100, 120, 130 is a good start. Ratio. Ratio is how much a compressor compresses. So, for example, ratio 1 to 0 is nothing. It's not going to work at all. It's not going to compress. 2 to 1 means for every 2 decibel that the peak goes over the threshold. If the peak goes above the threshold, 2 dB is gonna compress 1 dB. For a voice, I like something like 3, from 2 to 3. 4 is, I don't go beyond 4 unless I'm limiting, like maybe, if you set it to 20, it's gonna be working really, really hard. It's gonna be compressing these peaks like crazy, and it's gonna be audible, sometimes unnatural. So around 3 is fine. Ni is sort of a gentleness of a compressor. If you increase it a little bit, it sounds more smooth, I should say. And this is the threshold, which you're gonna be playing around with. Now watch these green meters.
My luck is...
Oh, wait a second. Let's start somewhere here.
I keep thinking right now about I keep thinking right
now. When this green meter goes above the threshold, the compressor starts working, and you see the gain reduction, the reduction in volume represented over here.
I keep thinking right now about Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
Also, select a quiet part somewhere. Where is quiet part? Like here.
She was a PhD.
And you don't want the quiet parts to be compressed.
She was a PhD.
So just raise it just a little bit.
She was a PhD. She's got a PhD.
No, God. She's got.
She's got a PhD.
Because God is louder than other words.
She's got a PhD. She's a Rosaria Butterfield. She was a PhD. She's got a PhD.
Nice. Now let's listen to the difference.
And I'm just on. And I'm just on.
Let's bypass the compressor.
And I'm just on.
It's much louder without the compressor because we're hearing these loud peaks and all their glory, but we don't want that. We want to level out the sound.
And I'm just
louder.
And I'm just honored to have her.
So you hear the compressor taming these loud parts, and the volume becomes more controlled and consistent. Let's do the same with Rosaria's voice.
That's the big picture answer.
Let's start with EQ. EQ.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details.
Now you can notice this is where her voice, the frequency cuts off, because that's how Skype did it. Skype reduces the quality of the sound in order for it to contain less information and therefore being more transferable in real time over the internet. Because if Skype is going to transmit the sound in its full glory up to 20 kilohertz, it's gonna eat up a lot of bytes of transmission, I guess. So what we want to do is select low pass, means lows are passing, highs are not. Don't make it that gentle, just like that.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details, is that when I was a professor, I wasn't just...
And we want to cut off this noise, because there is no voice here.
That's the big picture.
Skype has cut everything off here, and whatever happens here is nothing but hiss and noise and artifacts that we just want to clean out.
That's the big picture answer.
Same with lows. High pass. High pass, meaning all the highs are passing. And the same, something like 85 hertz. Or you can watch the spectrogram and see the fundamental frequency of a particular voice.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details, is that when I was a professor, I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian.
Like over here was the lowest point where the Rosaria's voice goes, so you don't want to cut here because you would lose this fundamental bass frequency of Rosaria's sort of chest resonance. That's what it is. But you clean out any engine rumbles, any air conditioning, whatever happens down here. You don't need it. And you may want to kind of search, sweep, make a sweep here and see any weird resonances that just doesn't sound good to your ear and cut them out a little bit. Let's do that.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details, is that when I was a professor, I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian faith. I found the Christian faith to be threatening and dangerous. And so when I was in a lesbian relationship, and I was at that point a professor at Syracuse University, after my tenure book was written, and after my tenure was pretty secure, I started writing a book on the religious right, and there.
Somewhere here there was a little box in it.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details.
Yeah, it was
that
kind of boxy sounding So we just clean it up a little bit.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details, is that when I was a professor, I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian faith. I found the Christian faith to be threatening and dangerous. And so when I was in a lesbian relationship, and I was at that point a professor at Syracuse University.
There was some resonant frequency over here as well.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it.
Now let's bypass.
That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the details, is that when I was a professor,
it sounds a little cleaner with these cuts over here. Skype already, it looks like it applies a sort of internal limiting to the signal. You see how these peaks are, they look like they've already been cut off. It means there is some limiting or compression that was already applied internally by Skype. That, I guess that's what Skype does to make the voice louder and, you know, more audible. But we still see these quiet parts over here. So whatever Skype did wasn't enough, because there are high peaks and there are loud parts. So we want to apply some compression on Rosaria's voice as well. Now compressor is gonna follow after the equalizer. So add dynamics, compressor, okay. Now again, attack around 10, release around 130, 20, something like that. Ratio around 3. Knee to make it smoother just a little bit. And now the threshold. Watch the green meters, and you want to set the threshold just below the highest peaks.
That's the big picture answer. That's the big picture answer. The grid of it, the deep
Now you don't want the compressor to touch any of the low parts.
Picture answer.
And it doesn't. But it does touch this one, so it's too much.
The grid of it, the details, is that when I was a professor, I wasn't just someone who ignored the issue of the Christian faith. I found the Christian faith.
Let's bypass both the EQ and compressor.
The grid of it, the details. The grid of it, the details, is that
Engage.
the grid of it, the details, is that when
The volume becomes more controlled. It's not jumping all over the place. And we sort of attenuated this boxiness over here.
the grid of it, the details, is
Now without,
the grid of it, the details, is that
I think it sounds pretty nice with them. Now, we've created this track, but we haven't routed these tracks onto this one.
the grid of
So
it.
let's do that right now, and we'll put a limiter onto this track so that when both voices go through this track, they will not clip. We won't see any red here. So go to route over here, or here, it's the same. This is the mixer that represents these tracks. So go to route, here's Nick's voice, route. Master send means that Nick's voice is being routed to this big master send track. When we uncheck it, it means we are not going to hear Nick's voice at all, because it's not being routed anywhere. It's not being routed to master send. Let's see. Here's Nick's voice. We don't hear it. It's there, but we don't hear it. We hear Rosaria because it's not being routed to the master send. So where we want to route it is here. Add new send. Both this both track that we created and named both. Now it's gonna be routed to this track, this both. Let's make it a different color so we know that track color set to custom. Let's do something like that. Add. Okay, now it's orange. Now we know that both of these tracks are being routed into this one, and we are gonna set the same to Rosaria. So Rosaria, we are taking it out of master send and we are adding new send. We are sending it to this track number 3 both. Now these two tracks are being sent to this one, and after this one they're going to the master.
I keep thinking right now about Sesame Street song. One of these things.
So now, if we add any effects over here, it's gonna affect both Nick's and Rosaria's voice. And what we wanna put on here is an equalizer again and a limiter. So let's put a limiter. Now we've added the limiter. It's probably gonna be under new because we've just edited this limiter. Okay. Now that's a kind of a big intimidating interface. You can turn off, this one off. You can turn off these ones. We need this one, the last one. Put it on upper position, the precise mode. Ceiling. Put the ceiling to -2. It means that any signal that exceeds -2 dB is gonna be compressed. This limiter is not gonna let anything go above -2. So we're not gonna see any red clipping here and no red clipping on the master bus.
How do you get from being an atheist?
What we can do now is increase the overall volume of these two tracks. Look.
How do you get from being
becomes louder.
An atheist lesbian who I'm guessing would probably be an anti-Christian as well?
Oh, that's too much. That's too much. That's all right.
How do you get from being an atheist lesbian who I'm guessing would probably be an anti-Christian?
Okay, so what we've done is we actually increased the volume by 3.6 dB of both tracks because we pushed them into the ceiling, but the ceiling is preventing the audio from going over -2 dB, which is great. We made it louder, but without any peaks. It's not going into the red, because if it goes into the red, it means it goes above digital 0. And when it goes above digital 0, when we render it into the final MP3, it's gonna be clipped, like it's gonna be just ugly, just terrible. We don't want that. So limiter, awesome. And we're gonna insert the same limiter on the master track later. Oh, equalizer. Totally forgot. Let's call this one. Add new. EQ. Rear EQ. Okay. And we want the limiter. We want the limiter to be after the equalizer. First the equalizer, and at the very end the limiter. On the equalizer, we're gonna brighten up our voices. We're gonna make a little boost on the high frequencies so the voices sound more clear, more present. Let's listen to that. Let's bypass it.
I keep thinking right now about Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
Engage.
I keep thinking right now about Sesame Street song. One of these things is...
It sounds more present, doesn't it? Let's just boost it silly, like that.
Now about Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
Without?
How? Now about Sesame Street song.
That was without, now with.
Now about Sesame Street song. One of these things is not.
Now it sounds brighter. Well, that's too much, obviously, because I wanted to make a point. Because all the S's, like sesame, they become obnoxiously loud. So we want to control that with a de-esser. That's another tool. De-esser is like a compressor, but it's going to be compressing only the high frequencies in order to allow us to boost high frequencies here to make the voices more bright and clear sounding, but without accentuating the S's and making them harsh. So we're gonna go back to Nick's track, effects, add a de-esser. I think de-esser was under here, JS, and let's look for there, de-esser. Okay. Now a de-esser lets us to listen to whatever this de-esser is listening. This is what de-esser is hearing, and when it starts compressing wherever S's get too loud. Here's where you regulate what it's hearing, whatever frequencies you're telling it to start compressing. Here. Let's mute Rosario for a while.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here. How do you get from being an atheist lesbian who I'm guessing would probably be an anti-Christian as well to being a preacher's wife? Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
It's too much.
How do you get from being an atheist lesbian who now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here. How do you get from being an
and bypass it, unbypass it, and hear what it does to the sound. Listen.
Now that Sesame Street song.
Are too loud with it.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like.
The S's are more controlled.
Now that Sesame Street song.
Without.
Now that Sesame Street song. Now that Sesame Street song. Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
Yeah.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
Now what we can do is bypass all of the effects and hear the difference. Bypass, bypass, bypass.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other.
It's not bright at all. It's kind of nasally sounding.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not.
Now with our effects.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here.
It's warmer because we added a little bass. It's brighter because over here we added this little boost, which is actually, I think it's too much.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other here. Now that Sesame Street song. Now that Sesame Street song.
That's too much.
Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other. Now that Sesame Street song. Now that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other.
Nice.
The issue of when I was in a lesbian relationship, and I was at that point a professor at Syracuse University.
Let's bypass and hear how the effects affecting Rosario's voice.
When I was in a lesbian relationship, and I was at that point a professor at Syracuse University. After my tenure book was written, and after my tenure was, pretty secure, I started writing a book on the religious right, and there...
Yeah, with effects, it becomes a little more bright, a little clearer, because we removed the boxiness in this range, and we brightened it up with this EQ, and it's also compressing, so the volume is more even. So once you've...
Pretty secure.
Once you've gone through every minute, every second, and once you've cut out every and ah that you think should be cut out, then you can import the intro and outro. Intro with fade, outro with fade. You can import it, separate, of course. Select all of it, kind of slide.
Hello.
More.
Hello, everyone.
Nice. You don't need this junk over here, so just cut it. And on top, you can do a little fade to avoid any clicks that could result from this cut. Same here, you can just cut all that. What is this?
Bartos Podcast.
Oh, you don't need that, so cut that.
Bartos Podcast.
Come on.
Bartos Podcast.
Podcast. You might want to cut here too and crossfade to make it smoother. Cast. So yeah, there's a lot of editing that's involved, and it takes practice, and you know. Oh, we need to put a limiter, a gain, on this master track, and that limiter is going to be affecting every track over here, the intro, the outro, the voices, everything. So we're putting the limiter. Okay, we're turning off everything else but the limiter. Put it at precise, -2 over here. And why do we want to put a limiter here if we are already limiting the voices? Because we have the intro music, and even though the voices are not peaking over -2, when the sound is combined with music, it is peaking over -2. So we're not gonna push the output, so we're not gonna push the level of all the sounds into the ceiling. We're just setting the ceiling as a sort of a protector. So if anything ever happens to go above -2, it's just gonna prevent it. So that's the only thing we're using it for. What, you know what? This is what I usually do if there are two voices in a podcast. And since we are bouncing to stereo file, this is pan. You can put voice in the stereo field to the left or to the right. Listen.
This interview came that her story is very famous. Actually, I was telling one.
Now, you don't want to do it all the way to the left or to the right, because when we bounce it out and the person is listening to your podcast with only one earbud in their ear, they're gonna hear only one voice and not the other, because one is gonna be on one side and one on the other. What I like to do is to put one at around 15% to the left and another around 15% to the right. Now, 15% is really, really small amount, but it gives this little separation, as if you are sitting in a room across from each other. It just gives a little nice touch of stereo-ness. Listen.
Dr. Butterfield, welcome to the Deeper Waters podcast.
Thank you, Nick. It's an honor to be on your show.
Now, it's an honor to have you here. Yep. I keep thinking right now about Sesame Street.
Yeah, it just gives a little bit of unnoticeable separateness. And let's say if you're listening in your car, you won't even notice at all. But if you're listening on your headphones, on your earbuds, it just gives a nice little unnoticeable touch of this separation, which is quite nice. And I think now we are ready to render to a final MP3. So what we want to do is we want to select whatever we want to be rendered with these little things over here. Come on, come on. Like that. And now we are ready to render. File, render, time selection. Now it would probably end up like that entire project, which means if there is empty space before introduction, it's gonna render that too. So we choose time selection, so it's gonna render whatever we selected. You choose the file, the folder where you want the file to end up. So browse for directory, and you choose the folder where you want the file to end up. Rosaria. File name. How do we name it? Year, month, day, Rosaria, Butterfield. Right? Right. 44,100 stereo. If we have just voices without any intro music, and if we haven't panned them, here, this one 15% to the left and 15% to the right, if both voices were in stereo, and if we don't have any stereo music, we may choose this mono. But we don't. We have stereo music. We have panned them in stereo field a little bit, so we're choosing stereo, of course. Leave it at good, MP3. You want MP3. You would choose WAV if you are going to export the project to some other editing software, maybe Pro Tools. Maybe you want to export just one voice and send it to Pro Tools to use better compressors on it or something. Then you would choose WAV because you don't want to reduce quality every time you transfer files in between workstations. But now we want MP3 because we're gonna upload it to the website, to iTunes, through the RSS feed. Bitrate, constant bitrate. Here, constant bitrate 128 kilobytes per second, which is a standard bitrate for a stereo file. 128 kilobytes per second. Render one file. You can watch the meters, make sure nothing clips, because we've set our limiter at -2. So yeah, we see it -2.1, which is good. And yeah, it's doing it quite fast. What is it? 14 times the speed. Huh, that's impressive. Yeah, you can go and have a cup of tea while it's rendering. We'll come back and listen back to the file. Now let's see what we've done. Here's the file. Let's listen to it. You stand on the shore of the...
And twice before something's going... And
Hey, how did you get here? It manipulates us by the what's called compulsory heterosexuality and lesbian existence. And so the idea was, because heterosexuality is just compulsory.
We have forgot something to...
You know,
we have,
in culture.
Do you hear the echo?
You have to go out
Exactly. We forgot to put a gate onto Nick's track because Nick's microphone recorded Rosaria voice bleeding from his headphones. his headphones were too loud, I guess, and Rosaria's voice was audible, and his microphone picked it up. So we need to get it out. So let's just delete what we've just rendered, and let's put a gate effects. So gate goes after de-esser in this case. Here, gate. Now what gate does is it closes, it doesn't let any sound go through it that doesn't exceed the threshold. So let's put attack, like, again, 10. Now, release is how long does it take for the gate to close. Put it at about something 7 or 8, so it takes a little bit of time for it to close. It doesn't close abruptly and noticeably. And hold is how much time it takes for the gate to hold before it starts releasing, before it starts closing. I put it at around 7 milliseconds, 700 milliseconds or so. So let's listen. This is where Rosaria's voice was kind of bleeding through the headphones. So set it just above. Boom. You don't hear anything because the gate closed. The threshold just above. So a little more. Oh, now when Nick said now his is noticeably louder. That's why the gate opened. But before that, it remains closed because the level doesn't go over the threshold. Now when this comes, the level will go over the threshold and the gate will open. Look. The gate opened and the was let through and the gate closed again, so we don't hear all of this, the echo. Nice? Let's save the project. Let's just save it in the same folder where we imported files from. Let's name it Rosaria Reaper. Okay. Now we are ready to render it again. We already have it selected, do we not? Yeah, we already have it selected. Nice. So let's unsolo. Make sure it's unsoloed, because if you have only one track soloed, it's gonna render only that. So everything else will be muted. So unsolo, and let's render again. Render. Deeper Waters, Rosaria. We have the name. Stereo, MP3, 128 kilobyte per second. Render. Here is something I've totally forgot to mention. And let's close it. And that's about your room, Nick. Your room has a humming sound in it that is probably coming from either an air conditioner or a heater or a water boiler that's either behind a wall, or maybe neighbors have it. Let's select some area. Let's solo. Let's deactivate the gate because it won't allow us to listen to this area.
She is.
I don't know if you can hear it, but let's add an equalizer because it has a spectrum analyzer. See this bump? See this bump over here? This is a constant humming noise that is audible. So what you might want to do is take this band, make it really... Oh, actually, I've discovered that the hum is around 120 hertz. So if we increase the gain on it, now you'll be able to hear the hum. Do you hear? It's there. So you might want to cut at a very, very sort of very narrow cue. Very narrow. It's not gonna affect your voice because it's so narrow, but it will get rid of this humming resonant frequency which is happening at 120 hertz. Well, I've discovered it, that's why I'm telling you it's 120 hertz, so you don't have to discover it on your own. And put this EQ before the compressor. Come on. First EQ, second, third, our compressor, our de-esser, and our gate. And now we should be done. So now you can render the file again, and now your track should not have this humming. That's how it goes. There is a humming noise that is like constantly there. Okay, I guess we're not gonna render it again because we've done it already. So I hope it was helpful. Practice. Once you practice, your ears will learn how different frequencies sound, how compressors work, how limiters work, and I think you can do it yourself. It's not hard at all. So have a blast editing your podcast. See you later.